FCA, and God, FCA, I don't know how they're staying in business.
Charm.
I mean, every single brand is way down. Ram is down, Jeep was down a couple of percent. Not to mention Dodge and Fiat and Chrysler.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they're really just sucking wind.
Right.
So
Well, the hilarious one is Volkswagen. So negative, 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 negative. 7%, 2.9%, negative, negative, negative.
well,
And so it all comes down to Touareg and Atlas,
I was going to say Atlas
yeah,
is
Atlas
probably.
is all new.
or in Tiguan.
Tiguan should be
It's
showing
just
some
those
growth.
two cars.
Yeah.
Hey, want to thank everybody who's already tuned in live. We're going to learn a lot about the Hyundai Kona in just a moment. And if you haven't heard about that car, well, you're going to hear a whole lot about it. If you already know about it, or even if you don't, and you've got questions, shoot us an email. Send it to viewermail@autoline.tv, or we'll take the phone calls too. And as you guys know, that number is 620-288-6546. And we're going to get going in just a moment here. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Well, we're back in the studio doing another Autoline After Hours. Gary, how you been?
I'm doing good. You know, I drove here today in a Kia Stinger, and I was thinking, if that was an autonomous car, would I really want to be in it? No, you want to drive cars like that. So I think there's a future for driven cars.
Yeah. And we should let everybody know, Tom Murphy from Ward's is with us today.
Glad to be here.
That's good to have you here.
First time I've been on After Hours.
Are you kidding me?
Not kidding.
Oh my God,
No.
because you've been on the TV program and we've done a
You've
ton of
been
things
here.
with you.
No,
Yes, you have. Sitting right there.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Short-term memory loss, Tom.
Yeah. Good thing Gary's here to remember what your life has
Thank
been.
you. Thank you, Gary. I'd be lost without you.
Okay, but we got to let everybody know our special guest right now is John Juriga. He is the Director of Powertrain for the Hyundai-Kia Technical Center. And John, great to have you here.
Well, glad to be here.
And even better still, you brought the brand new, first time I've set my eyes on it, other than in pictures, Hyundai Kona.
Right. We have high expectations for it. It should be a great vehicle.
It's what? It's a two-row compact crossover. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we consider it more of a subcompact
Okay.
crossover.
But this is not this would be not a B-class car, is it? B plus?
Yeah, it's
Chevy
It's a
Trax,
B?
right. It's
Buick Encore,
similar to
Honda HR-V,
Yeah.
Toyota CHR.
It looks
Right.
bigger than a B.
yeah,
Maybe it's the lines on the car. It doesn't look all hunched up.
yeah. But that's, as Tom mentioned, that's pretty much in the class. It's a competitor segment that we're looking for.
That's where the growth is.
And moreover, Hyundai really needs more crossovers in the lineup. That's no secret to anybody. Certainly not to Hyundai.
Right. Yes. This is the start of, I think, many more SUVs and crossovers that you'll be seeing over the next few years. But we have high expectations. This will go on sale here in a few months, and we're real excited about it.
So this is an all-new platform. So you guys basically had the opportunity to say, hey, let's truly engineer something for purpose. And tell us about that.
Turboline. Yes, it's an all-new platform, and comes in, from a powertrain standpoint, two different displacements. We have a 1.6-liter turbo and a 2-liter naturally aspirated engine. So we're really focusing on the younger entry-level folks that really want to get into a crossover vehicle, more individuals that have a very variety of lifestyles that have interest in doing camping and very active lifestyles, I guess is the best way to put it.
So for the 2-liter, which is an Atkinson cycle engine, more oriented towards economical driving, and then the 1.6 turbo more spirited driving?
Right. The 1.6 turbo, we got that mated up with our DCT, so it's more fun to drive, and not that the 2-liter is not going to be, but yeah, it's more situated with that type of differentiation.
Is there a plan for a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or EV? Or I was trying to recall.
You know, we're not really
Haven't confirmed. Okay.
we're not confirming that.
All right.
I think you know, hybrids and EVs are definitely a trend that you'll see more and more of. We have a lot of those coming out over the next few years. We're happy to be introducing the Kona right now with the 1.6 and the 2-liter today. We think there's definitely a big market for it, and we're anxious to see how it does.
You mentioned DCT. Is that for both engines?
Well, we have the DCT with the 1.6, and we have a 6-speed for the 2-liter.
Gotcha.
So this is front drive car with available 4-wheel drive?
Yes, correct. We have an all-wheel drive version of it.
Okay, I know you're a powertrain guy, but Michael Ma from San Francisco already wrote in to say, how'd Hyundai come up with the Kona name? He says, the only thing I think of is Kona coffee from Hawaii.
Sure.
Now, as you said, I'm only a powertrain guy. I really can't tell you where the name came from, other than it does have its roots in Hawaii.
So why do you name all your engines after Greek letters?
You know, that goes back a lot of years. It started with our first, you know, literally alpha engine, and it just stuck. So right now we go through our nomenclature with Greek letters, and that's just what we've been doing. Although that's on the gasoline side. On the diesel side, we use regular.
Alphanumerics, just
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The only problem with that is the new engine.
Right.
There's the Greek the NU engine family that, oh yeah, we've got a new engine. What? Oh, you mean the new engine? No,
Right.
no, I mean the new engine.
Right.
It's
Yes.
just
That's confusing internally as well. Yeah.
you got to get
That
rid
one.
of
That one we ran into a
Don't
roadblock.
you speak classical Greek?
confusing.
No.
I thought you did.
John, this, of course, you've been talking about the powertrains for the U.S. market. This is a global vehicle. Are there different powertrains available elsewhere?
For right now, we're just focusing on these two. Eventually, there could be different powertrains globally, yes.
All right, let me ask you about this, and maybe you can explain it so I'll understand it. So in the material about the vehicle, it said, to integrate the optional 4-wheel drive system, Hyundai engineers packaged a new intercooler layout and mounting position for the transmission to minimize intrusion into the cabin space. So what does that mean? I mean, what was the intrusion that you guys eliminated?
Well, I guess I wasn't involved in the packaging, so I really can't elaborate other than just to speculate that we want to try and have as much cabin volume as possible. So it's really just to try and minimize any impact.
So everything would stay in front of the firewall, as it were.
Everything trying to stay in front of the firewall. Yep.
Could have been some intrusion from the drivetrain that just impacted your footwell and the space in the footwell.
Even though you've got the same powertrains, at least right now, for the Kona globally, I got to believe that for calibration purposes, for the U.S. market, there's a lot of changes that you have to make, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of work. In fact, that's a lot of what we do in North America here, focusing on tuning for North American market. You know, our organization really focuses not only on the powertrain side, but in general, we focus in 4 areas. One is production development. So we do and are responsible for production release, responsible for some specific vehicles that we manufacture in the U.S. Then number 2 is validation, and validation for the high altitudes and high ambience that you'll see in the U.S. as well as cold ambience that you won't see elsewhere in the world. 3 is to help our manufacturing base. We have 2 vehicle assembly plants, 2 engine plants, a transmission plant in North America, plus more in Mexico. So we support those localized activities. And then we also do advanced development on technologies. So with regard to the Kona, and people may not necessarily understand how much effort there's put into to make sure that we satisfy American customers from a drivability standpoint. Americans really drive differently in a lot of respects than what you would get in Europe and especially in Asia.
Give us some for examples, because I think that's a fascinating point.
Sure. When you go into Asia, and if you happen to go into Seoul or anywhere in Korea, you're really not driving 80 miles an hour for any extended periods of time. There's a huge amount of congestion, so you don't really have sustained periods of time when you have open road. It just doesn't exist, and so they don't have to worry about that. They don't have the roads going up the mountains like we do. Most of the roads go around the mountains, so you don't have the kind of grades that you would have if you go into San Francisco for extended periods of time, or up in the mountains up in Colorado. So they just don't have those type of driving conditions. And so we have to make sure that our vehicles are tuned both from powertrain standpoint as well as suspension, steering, to handle those type of diverse conditions that you see in the U.S.
And how about the difference between North America and Europe?
North America and Europe, obviously we're a little closer. What really is more specific tuning-wise is a lot of our emission regulations that are very specific to North America. We have our onboard diagnostics, the OBD requirements, as well as the emission requirements. Our NOx standards are different, particulates, and so that drives to have unique calibrations for meeting U.S. regulations.
But are there different drivers' tastes? You know, I would imagine Americans want more instant response off the line, or something like that. Do you find those kinds of differences?
There are. You know, in Europe, there's a large percentage of manuals, and of course in the U.S. it's a very, very small, typically less than 1% of the volume is manuals. So people are used to driving manuals in Europe and have different expectations. In the U.S., I think most of our customers really want to be quick and responsive, but also more refined than something you would maybe get in Europe, especially when they're used to driving manuals. And most people start off in Europe as a young person driving the manual because they're lower cost vehicles. They're used to some things that American customers just wouldn't tolerate from a launch standpoint, an NVH standpoint. So I think Americans, in my opinion, are a little tougher to address. The expectations are a little higher.
So to that point, I mean, you're using a DCT. Now, historically, there have been DCTs that are somewhat more manual-like in terms of their lack of refinement, let's say. Have you guys been able to overcome that with your transmission?
Yeah, we've put a lot of effort into DCTs. They are a challenge, there's no question about it, because you don't have the torque converter that you would have with an automatic. And so therefore, the launching characteristics are a bit challenging for DCTs. So a lot of work has been put into them, and more work will, refinements are always taking place to make them better.
And I was also wondering, some of your competitors are going to CVTs rather than to step gear transmissions of any sort. So where are you guys on that?
Yeah, we're not here to make any announcements,
No, but I mean,
definitely we are very much looking at CVTs, and we think that there's a good marketplace. Obviously a lot of our competitors have chosen to pursue very successfully CVTs. When they first introduced the CVTs in the market, a lot of U.S. customers didn't like the drivability because you had that rubber band feel, that there was just this, and American customers were used to actually feeling and hearing shift points. So a lot of the calibration for CVTs, even with some of our competitors, they try and mimic the shift pattern of a automatic transmission, at least in certain modes. So you give that customer something that they feel comfortable with. So you can sort of trick the CVT into acting like an automatic, and that's what a lot of folks do. But CVTs are great. Every technology has its pros and cons. CVT by itself, efficiency-wise, is nowhere near where an automatic or a DCT is. A DCT runs at almost 96% torque transfer efficiency, very, very high. But CVTs allow the engine to operate in its sweet spot a lot more effectively than an automatic. So overall system efficiency can be really good with the CVT. So there's just different technologies and different applications, but they all can be good. There's no reason why you can't make any one of these technologies a really pleasable package in the right vehicle, in the right market segment. And that's the caveat. You got to develop this technology for that right segment. Not everything is good for everything.
So on the CVT, if you keep, if you use that phantom shifting and you're cycling through gears or shift points, simulated shift points, are you affecting fuel economy? And if so, by how much? I mean, would it have to be like you're constantly shifting this thing for it to actually impact fuel economy or not?
Yeah, there is an impact to fuel economy if you're literally making that transmission, the CVT, operate like a automatic. But it's relatively small, and I think customer satisfaction and pleasability is most important. Even though fuel economy to us is very critical, we pride ourselves on being a very environmentally friendly company. We also have to make sure, number one, the customer's satisfied with our products. So we're always trying to develop and keep that first and foremost. What is the customer expectation? And if they want to have that feel to get more comfortable, we may have in certain operating modes that type of shift feel when you're doing maybe a more aggressive acceleration. Then once you get more of a steady state, if upshifts, downshifts, we can make them literally transparent, which is what the customer wants. Once they get up to speed, they don't want to feel, if you're going up and down some grades, they don't really want to feel shifts in that. So the CVT can operate very smoothly and effectively and be more pleasing. So it all depends on the certain where you're operating the vehicle.
But have the CVTs become less relevant as we see 8, 9, 10 speed automatics that are more efficient, to some extent approaching the efficiency of a CVT? Does it if you really like the idea of an actual step gear transmission, does it make sense to say, well, we don't really need the CVT because we've got this new transmission that's doing just about as good a job in terms of fuel efficiency, plus it's more pleasing, it's more familiar to the driver?
Yeah, there's again pros and cons. The CVT historically has had limitations with torque capability, so you wouldn't necessarily put a CVT in a very high displacement or high duty cycle type of truck, for example, where you do a lot of towing in that. CVTs are not really good for that application, more from a durability standpoint. So their higher speed gear, step gear transmissions are the way to go. So CVTs are typically used in more smaller entry-level products and can be very cost effective. The multi-gear transmissions take up their physically larger in size, more mass, more cost. So they're typically put in higher vehicle applications that may have more physical space as well as more capability to accept higher costs overall from a systems standpoint. So the technologies have to be paired properly with the vehicle. I think that's the key message. But they all can be very, very efficient, very, very pleasing to the customer if integrated well.
We've got some more feedback from our viewers. Bob Dillon wrote in to say, talking about the Kona, nice. Looks like an actual crossover, not a lifted hatch. Andy G says, is this primarily for Europe and North America? Because in Asia, there's a similarly sized Hyundai, the Creta, that's, he says, based on the Kia Soul. So this has nothing to do with the Creta.
Right. It's a separate platform. But it is something that will be available in Asia as well. So this one thing that our company does very well, I think, is we're very much a global company, and we harness the different markets in the world so we can increase our volume. Hyundai Motor Group is the most diversified company in the world, automotive company, from the standpoint of our percentage of sales by global region. And that helps us take a product and balance it across many, many markets and keep the volumes up and costs down. So you'll see this vehicle in many, many applications around the world. And that's the benefit of having that global, footprint.
John, being a powertrain guy, I've got to ask, so the last Hyundai we had in the studio a couple months ago, we had a Hyundai Ioniq in here. And there was discussion around the thermal efficiency of the engine, okay? What does that mean, and how do you guys achieve that?
Sure. Thermal efficiency, and we pride ourselves on that engine. We call it our Kappa engine family, was at that 40% level. And it basically is trying to take, there's a certain amount of heat energy in the fuel itself. And so we want to try and optimize the energy that we draw from the fuel when we combust it. So there's thermal efficiency, mechanical efficiency, and volumetric efficiency. Those are the three things that all engineers are trying to optimize. And so that thermal efficiency is what we're trying to accomplish to try and improve to get the better fuel economy and performance. So you do that by increasing compression ratio, trying to optimize the mixture of air and fuel so you get complete combustion. So it has to do with your combustion chamber geometry, your compression ratio, your valve timing, and the whole combustion process. So that's what we're doing. There's a lot of technology out there, and everyone's trying to get that number up higher and higher. You know, the gold standard would be to try and match a diesel, for example.
What number is that?
A good diesel, you know, it can be the 45-50% range. You know, so that's where a lot of technology is focusing on how do we take the gasoline engine and really optimize it so that we can get that thermal efficiency up to where a diesel would be. And that's why you're seeing compression ratios continually climb. And in diesels, in a lot of cases, you've seen the compression ratios drop. So you're seeing almost a merging of those technologies in a lot of cases with technology like direct injection that gasoline engines are now using, albeit much lower pressures than diesels run, but still a direct injection and higher compression ratios, all trying to improve that thermal efficiency of the engine.
Along those lines, Charles Hart just wrote in. He says he likes the Kona too, and he says, please adopt the Acades engine for the Kona. Did you get down to the Detroit show? Acades had a display. Have you looked at the engine? What do you think?
Yeah, I did spend some time with the folks there. In fact, a good friend of mine works for Aramco, who's working with Acades on the development of that. It's a very interesting technology. I think it has the capability to be very, very efficient. It's actually a little larger in size when you saw it in person than I
was
expected.
surprised by the size, too.
Yeah.
Of course, it had a
No
big
way it's
blower
fitting
on.
in there, by the way.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's why they had it in an F-150, although they told me, look, we can make these things smaller. But
Yeah. Yeah, it has, I believe it will have a purpose. I think there are some concerns I personally have with its capability to meet the emission standards, because as you know, it's a two-stroke engine, so it will have its challenges from an emission standpoint. And I think there's also a big challenge with a lot of manufacturers that have literally billions invested in a certain architecture, and that would be a clean sheet of paper architecture. So for some applications, stationary generator sets that could operate very efficiently that aren't necessarily as regulated as much as the automotive industry, or some bigger truck applications could find some good use for it. So I think there's a place for that technology. I just don't see it in the light-duty truck or a car domain very readily.
Mm-hmm.
Even something smaller, like a 4-cylinder instead of a 6-cylinder?
Yeah, I still am concerned about the emission standards, especially as we move closer out into the years 2025. Particulate emissions and NOx standards drop tremendously. And I'm not the expert on that engine technology, but I just have concerns with two-stroke being able to meet that capability. I'm probably going to get one of my friends here going to be calling in here and telling me I'm all wet, but that may be the case.
But you think that engine would be more impacted than other traditional, internal combustion engine, four-stroke engines?
Yeah, I think so, because you're trying to do everything within the two strokes, the up and down of the piston in that chamber, and bring in you have an intake port, and you got to bring the rings past that intake port, and I'm worried about pulling back oil into the intake port or the durability of those rings past that intake port with a two-stroke. So I've been told that they've got fixes for that. And like I said, I don't want to badmouth the folks at Acades. I'm sure they're outstanding engineers. I just have my reservations.
Okay, let's talk about you guys. Last fall, the Hyundai Motor Group announced that you're going to have Smart Stream technology for your engines, and that you guys are going to be doing something that will get efficiency. So can you tell us what are some of the elements of this?
Sure. We're looking at the complete engine architecture and saying, how do we make it more efficient? So we're looking at those three key areas of volumetric, thermal, and mechanical efficiencies. And so we're looking at modifying our bore and stroke ratios to optimize, reduce friction, optimize torque. We're looking at cooling systems. There's a tremendous amount of effort that can be done on cooling systems to try and make sure that you heat the block as quickly as possible to reduce the viscosity of the oil, heat it up, but keep that cylinder head cool as possible so you can get better borderline spark conditions for better combustion. We're looking at increased compression ratios and valve trains that, and valve geometries that allow better tumble in the intake air coming into the combustion chamber, so you get better mixing, so you can improve your combustion efficiency and improve compression ratios. So we're looking at a lot of different areas. We're also looking at a lot more electrification of our hardware systems today. There's a lot of componentry that you can actually make into electric components. And a lot of people are doing it today with water pumps and electric cam phasers and a lot of the hybrid technology that you can apply towards the internal combustion engine. So I think you're going to see a lot of electrification and a lot of enhancements to the internal combustion engine to try and improve that efficiency to be at that 45, dare say close to 50%. That's a real stretch, but at least to that 45% with the intent of getting that fuel economy and performance.
So right now, I think Toyota claims the highest thermal efficiency at like 41% for the Toyota Camry hybrid engine. Are you going to beat that? Are you going to?
I'm sure we will.
Yeah. How soon?
I guess I can't tell you exactly when we will beat that, but as you mentioned, with a lot of the new technologies that we have for our sort of third generation of engine architecture that SmartStream was looking at, we're going to be applying a lot of the things that I just mentioned and more to try and get more performance, better fuel economy, cleaner emissions out of our powertrains, out of our engines. So there's a lot more that you can squeeze out of that internal combustion engine. We have not reached the threshold yet.
So do you think it'll continue? 10 years from now, could we be talking about internal combustion
absolutely.
engines?
Absolutely. No question. 110% confident of that.
Will car companies like Hyundai come up with completely new piston engines? i.e., I've heard one of the analysts in town that collects all the data on companies says they don't see any new engines being developed after around 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I guess, you have to take a look when you say engines, we're really talking powertrains, and there's internal combustion engines, and as we talked about all the electrification, so I guess it depends on what that definition of a new engine is. If
Piston
I'm changing,
engine. Internal combustion piston engine, spark-ignited gasoline.
Yeah, I think you will see some major changes, there'll be bore and stroke changes all the way to combustion chamber geometry changes, injection position. We've already seen a lot of application, including some of the work we're doing where you have direct injection and port fuel injection engines. So there's a tremendous amount of work that's ongoing with the piston engine. So that's going to be around. But I would be negligent to not also put a plug-in for all the way going out to fuel cells. And Hyundai just announced our Nexo fuel cell vehicle. So we're working on a tremendous spread of technologies, and fuel cells are really incredible technology as well. They're at 60% efficiency today. So from a transfer of energy, so they offer a tremendous amount of efficiency. The key for us right now is two things. One is you have to keep the system cost down, so it's very low volume. So the system cost is a lot higher than a conventional engine. And then, of course, infrastructure. Hydrogen infrastructure is a challenge for the country as a whole and the industry, but it'll get there.
So John asked a good question, though, and I've heard a very similar thing that that companies aren't. Some of the engineering companies that are hired by companies such as your own to test powertrains, and they're seeing that their test cells are not as occupied as they used to be. Particularly with all new engines. So, I mean, it's one thing to take an existing engine and adapt it for this or for that, or add port to direct injection, or else vice versa. Making something hybrid, making it a mild hybrid. So, I mean, it's easy to, well, I shouldn't say it's easy, but you can take an existing engine and do a lot to it to improve it. But the bigger question is, clean sheet, all new 4-cylinder engine, all new 6-cylinder, all new 8-cylinder. I know there's not a lot of those going on out there, but you know, you've been in this business for a long time and you've seen a lot of engines come and go, and you know what the cadence is, you know what the process is, and how long it takes to get an engine ready, you know, actually ready for market. So
Right.
have we reached a point where we're just not producing as many all-new engines, we're adapting perhaps what we already have?
I think there's a fair amount of adapting. However, you know, there is, and we joked about it earlier, our new engine was an all-new ground-up engine.
Yeah.
That we had our Theta engine. It was our base 4-cylinder, and we wanted another engine that had a little more, I guess, up-to-date technology. So we created our new engine, and now we're upgrading our Theta engine with some of that technology. So you have sort of a leapfrogging effect. Clean ground sheet of paper engines are few and far between because there's a tremendous amount of not only engineering cost but investment to tool up an engine from scratch. So I think most automotive companies are trying to take a look at how they can take what they currently have and add, again, that more electrification on that to try and improve the overall system efficiency. So it's probably fair to say that there's not a tremendous number of ground-up engines coming, but that doesn't mean they won't. You know, they're not going to be maybe on the same cadence because we have an explosion of all this new technology. You know, I look at it as this is the most exciting time in the world to be a mechanical engineer in the automotive industry because you're dealing with the internal combustion engine and tremendous advances that we never dreamed of. And then we have the electrification with all the electric motors and all the stuff that goes with that, like the inverters and all the electronics that are involved. We have the software and intelligence and the complexity that is just mind-boggling. The computers and the software to drive these systems are really incredible. And then you've got the fuel cell out there that is just complete, nothing even resembling a common component. So with that kind of diversity, it's tough to have one company just devoted towards a specific internal combustion engine because we have to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back to the Kona for a minute because we got to wrap this up in a moment here. What's the base price of the Kona?
You know?
I don't know off the top of your head.
I honestly don't know.
Gary, have they announced that yet, or
They did.
They did.
Yeah.
It's got to be around 20,000, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. And while Gary's looking that up, Andy G wrote in to ask any plans for a sporty Kona N, and of course being the performance brand at Hyundai.
Like the Veloster N.
Yeah, I can't talk to anything new, but I can tell you there's definitely a huge surge in our company, especially with our vice president, or actually president now, Bierman, who we got from BMW, who is really pushing very heavily to try and bring our brand up in some performance categories. And so,
Stay tuned.
stay tuned. Right, he's definitely creating a lot of fun projects for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you say this is the only vehicle on this platform, or is it shared with Accent or Elantra or anything else?
Right now, it's unique.
It's unique.
Yep.
Huh, all right.
Oh, here we got one of our.
Beat me, huh?
Yeah, I think it might be Charles Hart if I'm reading this right. The base price is $19,500. I'm sure that does not include destination charge.
Probably not.
But you can price it up to a little over $28,000. So, but with that, we're going to wrap this up. But John, thanks so much for coming on and talking about the Kona and Powertrain and all kinds of things that Hyundai's doing.
My pleasure. It was a blast.
It's great to have you here. And we're going to be back in a moment, but first we got to give a shout out to our good friends at Bridgestone. And we're back. And of course, this is the time where Dr. Data makes his appearance.
So you claim that you've never been on the show before.
Actually, after I said it, I think it was Buick. There was wasn't it Buick Encore or? Yeah, I was here. Sorry.
So I don't need to explain the Dr. Data segment.
I've watched the show. Doesn't mean, yeah, of course.
Oh, but you've been a participant.
Okay.
So John's been on a roll of late. So
Well, I got last week.
You got last week, and I think you got the week before that.
Okay, maybe.
All right.
Well, we'll see.
This one.
You're going to throw me for a loop.
This one. Okay. So this is going to be very notable. So, And, well, Carmen, please bring up the first slide.
Oh, we have slides.
So the first time in 40 years something happened, 504,599 units of something were sold. Look at you looking at
I'm looking at the blurry thing in the background.
Yeah. So what could this be? 40 years, and it's the first time this has happened.
In 1 year,
In 1 year.
hybrids?
So 504,599 hybrids were sold?
No.
That's your guess?
Could be.
Is that
I
your
mean,
guess?
Well, sure. Yeah.
Just say, thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, John's looking at the picture.
I have no. It looks like a camper, a motorhome to me in the background. So I'm going to say they sold that many RVs.
Damn you.
Really?
Carmen?
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, look at that.
So the number of RVs shipped in
That's a
2017.
stunning number.
It is. So I was just thinking about this. So, okay, is it cheap gas in an aging population?
It's the demographics, I think.
Those things are expensive. I mean, crazy expensive. You sell your house and you live in
It is a house, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many boomers retiring,
Mm-hmm.
and they've always dreamed of, I'm going to drive out to the west side of the country and visit all the national parks, and and they're selling their Harley Davidsons, obviously, to buy these motorhomes, because Davidson's sales are cratering.
Yeah, but those, you buy a Harley, you could buy like 20 Harleys for the price of one of those.
Yeah, or you put your Harley on a trailer and
But
drag it around with you.
But I mean, have you seen the Sprinters that are upfitted by Airstream?
Yeah.
Those things are just gorgeous.
Those are amazing.
It's just great
Fit and
cars.
finish, questionable though.
It doesn't matter.
So you think it's gas prices, Gary, or you think it's demographics?
I think
or
it's both. I think it's absolutely both. To get to the aging boomers, and they sink all their dough into this vehicle, and they're like, well, it's probably getting, I don't know what, 11 miles per gallon or something like that.
Gallons per mile.
There you go. But yeah, so I thought that was fairly astonishing that
That's a big number.
It's a big number, absolutely a big number. So
So we should get to one topic I wanted to jump into on this show, because last week we were just ending the show and we were having viewers send us stuff on Tesla's emergency.
So first responders who will come.
Exactly. And the guy who wrote in and said, oh, yeah, no, we've got it. I said, hey, fax it to us. Well, he didn't, but somebody else did fax it to us. And then several others actually sent us the link to where all that information is. So the info is out there for first responders to go study, and it's pages of it, of how you safely can cut into a Tesla if you're a first responder and not get electrocuted. The info is out there, but then we also had another viewer write in who went, hey, look, I am a first responder. I've never seen any of this stuff. So there are people out there who know how to go and get this information. There's a lot of other first responders. The guy who wrote in was a fireman. He said, I've never seen any of this stuff. So could be a little bit dicey cutting into not just electric cars, but especially the Model 3.
I would not be cutting into an A-pillar of any electric vehicle.
So what else?
Wasn't the C-pillar the big issue on that car?
There's two places to cut in on the car. One's under the hood, and one is on the right rear corner. But to see where to cut in, you have to open the lift gate on the car to get in and see the warning label that tells you where to take a circular saw and cut into the car.
Do a little reading while you're
Right, yeah,
saving people.
Exactly.
So today the sales came out. So
Sales.
So despite the 504,000 units of RVs that were sold.
Yeah, I don't know how many were sold in January.
No.
RVs, no.
But so what's your take on January sales?
I just came from the office, was focused primarily on Ford and FCA sales. And FCA, I have to say, for the month of January, it was really dire.
How much were they down? Do you
They
know
were down, I can
overall?
tell you overall, they were down 16.3%. And I can tell you individually by brand within FCA, Chrysler was down 24%, Dodge was down 33.9%, Ram was down 19.3%, Fiat was down 45.5%, even Jeep Jeep was down 1.9%. Alfa Romeo, because all their product is new, I mean, they're showing growth. You know, the Giulia was still relatively new a year ago now, and now comes the Stelvio, so they're, you know, they've actually sold 1,648 vehicles. So they're, you know,
That's okay.
compared to everything else, I mean, it's their only growth. It's
How many?
the only,
What was Fiat's total sales?
for the month of January was
1229.
1229.
Oof.
Yeah,
I mean, as a dealer, how do you stay alive?
it's, yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Alfa Romeo up by 1,426%.
Well,
Yeah, what Tom is
26%.
saying.
It's
That's-
all relative.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have
They're on
anything.
fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're on fire.
But Jeep will turn it around this year. I have no question about
the Wrangler,
that. But
yeah.
But you say Jeep is down, and according to the FCA numbers, they're up 2%.
Well, but we're looking at daily sales rates.
Yeah, so explain that, Tom.
So the Ward's Auto calculations, we figure based on, okay, how many, see, there were 25 sales days this January. There were 24 last year. So that one day can
make a big
throw off.
difference.
Yeah. So we're looking at a true apples to apples comparison, and also consider that Jeep getting rid of the Patriot. I mean, that has a lot to do with their sales being down.
Right.
And the Wrangler is in a
Sold
transition.
148 of them.
And the Wrangler isn't in the pipeline fully yet.
Yet.
So there's some, and the Jeep Grand Cherokee sales are down. It's interesting. I mean, these you know, you hear Jeep and you think automatically that is a very coveted brand in the U.S. And here in the month of January, even Jeep is struggling. So
Very interesting.
Ram, of course, you know, there'll be a new Ram pickup coming in a few months, built in Sterling Heights. They really need that to be a hit. But like Chrysler, if it wasn't for the Pacifica, Chrysler would be just sucking wind.
Yeah.
And Dodge, you know, what does Dodge have besides the Durango?
Nothing new.
You know,
Nothing new.
Durango's doing all right. Actually, Dodge is still selling the old Grand Caravan.
Yeah.
In addition to, you know, the Pacifica being the high-end minivan, they still have the older generation Dodge Grand Caravan, which, you know, for some people that's all they want. Or that's so
Yeah.
And they sold 10,000 of them, so.
not a bad number.
Ford had a pretty lousy month too, right? I mean,
Ford, yeah,
they didn't do so hot.
No,
In fact, Lincoln was a disaster.
it was.
They were off what, like 27%?
27%.
Well, by our numbers, Lincoln was down.
Even more?
Lincoln was down 30%
'Cause,
based on daily
the
sales,
selling rate.
and Ford was down 9% for a total Ford group being down 10.1%. And then when you look at the individual models, dear Lord, every vehicle within Lincoln except for the Navigator was down at least 40%. I'm sorry, Continental was only down 33%.
Still, that's
Continental is a
bad.
new car. You know, I mean that.
What was the number? How many did they sell?
They sold 815, and yeah, that's down
That's not-
33%.
Yeah, that's actually not that bad of a number. You
Yeah,
know, it
yeah.
down that much from a year ago, but that's pretty much on trend where it was for much of the rest of the year.
But you know, the rest of the portfolio at Lincoln, it's stale. You know, the MKZ, the MKX is down 40%, even though the MKX was new, what, 18 months ago, 2 years ago? They're
But
still.
the X is getting replaced, right? That's the Nautilus
Yes.
is replacing
Oh,
it,
that's
right?
right.
So, but that's not out yet. The Nautilus has not hit the market.
But
has it?
it's basically a major refresh.
It
It's-
is.
It's not a new car.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the point of the Continental sales, if you look at Cadillac, 626 CT6s. So that would be the apples to apples comparison. So if I'm in Dearborn, I'm breaking open the champagne.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I noticed going to GM, Cadillac, its passenger car sales look like to me like they're finally hitting bottom. ATS was actually up.
Yeah.
CTS was down, not a whole lot.
4.2%,
Yeah, CT6 was down, but not a lot, just a fraction of a percent.
0.9.
So our numbers are showing that ATS was actually up 13.8% on a daily sales
And
basis.
now, you know, ATS, CTS, CT6, and XTS have been a disaster, but it looks to me, with the exception of the XTS, the old big one, which was off quite a bit, maybe Cadillac finally is hitting bottom when it comes to cars.
But this is pretty funny. The XTS, the old big one, sold 1,220 vehicles. So that means it sold more than the CT6 and it sold more than the
CTS.
Continental.
Yeah.
So
CTS.
actually that old
Battle wagon is doing pretty
just
good.
rolling on.
That's right.
CTS, they only sold 662 of them last month. XT5 is Cadillac's bestseller, down 1.4%, and they sold 3,989 units.
But the big one is
January.
you cannot have a healthy General Motors without a healthy Chevrolet, and Chevrolet was up. Even though there were individual models that were down and down by a lot,
Yep.
Chevrolet was up, right?
Chevrolet, by our numbers, they were flat. They were 0.9% up.
Okay.
And by Chevy's numbers, they're up by 5%.
But
Okay, and that's the difference in the daily selling rate.
And you need to look into the numbers here, for the specific brands or the models. So Equinox was up 44.2% to 26,405 for the month. Silverado, even though the Silverado is about to be replaced, was up 9.9% to 40,716 units. It was the only full-size truck that was up. Well, I can't speak for Nissan or for Toyota, but relative to F-150 and to the Ram, the Silverado was the only one that was up significantly.
Tundra was up, but it's much smaller numbers.
Yeah. Another one that was up, of course, the Traverse is up 35.8%. So I mean, they've got the right products, to really drive up the volume in some of these really important segments.
Yeah. Gary, you got the numbers there too. Toyota had a pretty good month, right?
Yeah, total Toyota was up daily selling rate by 12.1%, but by volume 16.8%.
Okay.
So, so that's total Toyota. Toyota division was up 12.3% daily selling rate, or 17% volume. And Lexus, which has been struggling, was in the positive territory, 10.4% or 15%.
Based
depending.
on what were some of the popular models for Lexus? Because the LS, which is a really, really nice.
Oh, it's dead in the
new
water.
flagship.
It's not selling.
Well, it isn't on sale in the U.S. until February, I think.
Oh, well, the ones they got aren't selling very well.
Well, they sold 116 of them.
I think those are the old. That's the old. They're
Just selling out the
they're
old?
Probably cleaning out the inventory. But
Gotcha.
the new one, I
Well,
understand, doesn't
so
go on sale
basically,
next month.
it's
or this month, February.
the classic. The Lexus situation is the classic truck sell.
Yeah.
So
It's the RX.
so depending on which number we want to use, whether I'm using volume, screw you.
That's fine.
It's a bigger number. It seems more impressive. So the NX was up 41.9%. The RX was up a mere 22.1%. The GX was up 12.1%. But the LX, the giant, the Land
big one.
Cruiser type unit,
Yeah.
was actually down 31.8%.
Isn't that one new? I'm trying to.
No.
I'm thinking of the GX. That was.
So it's probably too early to say what the market in total did, right? We probably
for
don't
us,
have all the
we don't
numbers.
have-
Or
yeah,
Gary,
we
do
don't
you
have
have
all
something
the-
there?
I don't have all the numbers yet.
Yeah, okay, they're still coming in, but
Right.
speaking of sales, Gary, I know this is a topic you wanted to get into. Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi. Are they number one in the world?
Now, so after I sent you that, I started looking into this. So basically, okay, so Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi said that they're the number one in the
They
world.
sold more vehicles than anybody else,
And anybody else in the world, and
which
they,
is essentially saying we're better than Toyota or Volkswagen.
So they claimed that the combined sales by Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi Motors were up 6.5% to 10,608,366 units. And then I got to thinking, it's like, is that really the biggest number? Then I looked at Volkswagen's numbers for the year. And lo and behold, there's 10,297,000 units.
So 10.2 versus 10.6 that
There's probably a lot of-
Renault-Nissan-Mitsu are
There's
claiming.
probably a lot of commercial vehicles that get baked into that.
And,
yeah.
and that was
Nissan.
the difference was that. And then I looked at Toyota, and its worldwide sales last year were 10.3
Yeah.
or 10.4 basically. But but the question I have is that does that matter anymore? Does being the biggest manufacturer in the world matter?
I don't. To me, no. It's got to be important in some realms of corporate management, but
Look,
clearly General Motors wouldn't have sold off all of those brands or shut down the brands if they decided that we got to be the biggest, I mean, being the biggest isn't the best necessarily.
I'd say right now, scale still matters. The more vehicles you make, the more you can spread your investment cost over each vehicle and lower your overall cost. But I also believe we're heading towards a world where there's going to be a lot more ride sharing and car sharing and public transportation and all that kind of stuff. And that being the biggest is going to be a disadvantage. Not right now, maybe in another decade and beyond, but so I'd say being big still counts for something.
Okay, so the thing I was wondering about is that, okay, if you're really big and yes, you're able to amortize your costs across the board. I mean, we heard a little of this from, John was saying about how, they're not really dependent on any one market because they sell all over the place, right? And so if somebody goes south, something will pick it up. But the thing I begin to wonder about is it the ability to spread your engineering costs more important than your ability to come out more quickly with new technology that you can sell at a premium and therefore have greater margins than selling more at lower margins?
Yeah. Look, why do all these companies exist? To make money. So really, it's not who sells the most cars, it's who makes the most money.
Right.
That's the most important, to your point, Gary, because then you can take those profits and then reinvest it into other things that will make you even more money. So we've seen companies in the past, General Motors being a great example, being #1 in the world and having paper-thin margins. Today, not selling as many vehicles as it used to, General Motors is far more profitable than it used to be. So just using them as that one example, I'd say making the most profit is the most important metric.
Don't you think, though, in the future, I'm curious about your point about in the future, size might not be as much of an issue, but don't you think scale still applies in the age of autonomy? And perhaps an automaker buys Uber, buys Lyft, and has this whole vertical integration thing where they're making the vehicles and then they're creating the markets in which they get delivered to actual consumers. And it seems like scale still would matter.
Scale will still matter, but there's going to be a tipping point, I believe, because it will all depend on, if I'm right, how fast car sales start to drop. And we're already seeing in the United States a smaller percentage of the population buying a new car every year. And this is a long-term trend. Fewer and fewer people. Now, they're not giving up on cars. They're going out and buying used ones. But I think in the next decade, we're going to see car companies say, we've got too large of a manufacturing footprint. And and that's where the tipping point is. You still want scale, but you don't want excess manufacturing capacity, which will kill your profitability.
So it forces more consolidation then, doesn't it? I mean, you don't see a company like Mazda existing by itself,
Well, it kind of
well
doesn't
into the
anymore,
future,
right? Toyota owns a part of it.
That's right, and maybe that's going to get even more involved in terms of that relationship. Right. It just seems like, you're right. If people aren't out there buying cars because I love that color, I love that powertrain, or I love the shape of that, whatever. If in 15 or 20 years cars are just commodities and they're just getting you from point A to point B, we still have to make them. Question is, who gets to make the most of them? And I mean, how that gets decided is anybody's guess. But it seems like that's where you really do need to be, a vast enterprise that can reach out to all segments of the economy.
Wait, hold that thought, because we got to take a quick break right now.
Sorry.
But hold that thought, Gary. We're going to come right back to it. But first, we're going to give a shout out to our friends at Lear.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Okay, we're back, and we're
All right,
talking
so
about
here's-
scale and all kinds of things.
So, to your point about needing to have a large capability in order to meet the needs of the future, and to go to John's point that, okay, if there's greater car sharing, by its very nature, we need less units, right? So we draw down a certain number there. The other thing is you think about it, that the auto industry as we know it today is basically predicated on variety, right?
Yep.
So we have a whole bunch of different models.
350 models
Right?
just
So
in
we
the
have-
U.S. market.
So we have a whole bunch of different models, and within those models, we have trim levels and powertrain options, and on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so as you were saying, that if it's just transportation, when you go on your phone and you get this Uber, that let's say Ford buys Uber. Okay, so now Ford owns Uber, right? And so you get the Uber car to come over to you don't care what it is, basically, right? And if you're Ford, do you say to yourself, well, okay, now that I own this, do I still make Fusions and Focuses and Fiestas and Tauruses? Or do you just say, you know what, we'll just sort of make this...
Everybody into a Transit Connect.
We'll just, well, no, it would even be like, okay, we'll make the model, you know, the 21st century Model T, okay? It'll be the car for every man. It'll be the car, and it could be like a Transit Connect. And then you say, and we'll keep making F-150s and Mustangs, right? Because that'll be for the outliers, or the F-150 will be for the everyman, but and the rest of it, so you need to build fewer of them, and your variety is gone. Because there's no need. Because as you say, you don't care if it's blue or red or yellow.
If you use Uber or Lyft or any of the other ones out there, all you care is that the car is clean, really. I've never seen anybody go, ugh, that's a Camry. I'm not going to take that Uber car.
I think about it like the taxi market today, that exists today. Sometimes you need a minivan that's where you can fit 4 people with lots of luggage. Or sometimes you only need a back seat because there's 2 people and you just need a trunk for your luggage for 2 people. So, I mean, that's the extent of the variety. But then, yeah, you're right. I mean, I have such concern about this because I don't want a world where a 911 is something that doesn't matter. You know,
I agree. I'm with you.
It's just so frightening.
I don't want to see that, but I think it's coming anyway.
Oh, see, I think I think when we had Bob Lutz on the show a year or 2 ago, he basically said, you know, that cars like that will become like thoroughbred horses. Okay, people still own horses, right? And they.
I'm talking about a lot fewer horses though going forward.
Well, I know, but I mean, but basically, so there'll be special cars that people will buy, and they'll drive these special cars on special tracks or whatever.
Museum pieces. That's what they'll. End up
Nah,
being.
not really. I think they'll be recreational pieces.
Hey, we're getting towards the end of the show here. We still got some viewers that have written in fact, one called in. Let's bring in that phone call.
Or not.
I was just curious about the Corvette recently and in the near future. Do you think possibly by 2025 could the Vet be canceled? I'm just saying that because Opel is gone, essentially. And I know the new mid-engine Vet's coming out in 2020, but there's no four-door Vet. There's no wagon made by Chevrolet/GM. Could you see this vehicle canceled in 2025, 2024? My best example is Opel and several other vehicles in the past, because I don't believe GM is taking any prisoners anymore. Thanks very much. Great show. And by the way, how about the Ford Mustang? Is it too sacred also? I mean, in the next 3 or 4 years, sales have been going down. They're not bad. And is it too sacred to be canceled as a sports car and slapping the name on a crossover or a sports crossover, just
no,
like
they can't.
Mitsubishi has done with the Eclipse?
Hey, thanks for the call there, Paul.
As long as Mark Royce has a pulse, there'll be a Corvette.
Yeah. Well, Tom, you were just worried about the 911 going away.
Right,
You think
right.
the Corvette would ever go away?
God, I can't even
Or the
imagine.
Mustang.
I can't even imagine. He says, okay, so there's no 4-door Corvette. Well, there's no 4-door Mustang or Camaro either for a reason. Geez, I just can't think that far ahead to envision a world where those cars are irrelevant. You know, I just think there's still enough. I have nephews who are total car geeks, and they are psyched about every new model that's coming, and they want to know every bit about it. So my hope is that, you know, the younger buyers, the younger generation, God help them, that there's enough of them that are going to keep these cars, you know, the kind of cars that people still lust after and really want to spend time behind the wheel, not just being driven around. Okay, there's a market for that too, you know, for being taken someplace, but there's something exhilarating about driving a car, and that's what brought us all to this industry.
Gary, they're going to kill off the Corvette or Mustang?
I don't see it.
Never.
No, I don't think so either. Hey, unless they start losing money on them and don't see any way out of it. But as long as they're not losing money, there's always going to be a Corvette and Mustang.
So there's a new ZR1 that's launching at $120,000. You know,
yeah.
Yeah, but
they're not going to lose a lot of money on
set
that.
the production car record at VIR earlier this month. So yeah, that's.
Okay, here we go. Rapid fire style. Gary, Barry Rector wrote in to ask, why is Elon selling flamethrowers? Is he trying to divert attention from their production numbers?
No, because he promised that if he sold a sufficient number of hats, he would sell flamethrowers. So the man is just doing what he
He's
said.
a man of his word.
He's a man of his word.
At
And
least when it comes to flamethrowers.
by the way, they made $5 million. I mean, think about that. How bizarre is that? Okay, can you imagine like Bill Ford coming out and saying, you know, if I sell whatever, I'm going to sell refrigerators, or, you know, Mary Barra coming out and doing. But Elon, it's just like the guy's.
P.T. Barnum, he knows how to get attention.
It is a distraction. It's totally like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You know, it's just, he just wants people to, oh wow, look at the self-driving semi-trailer that we put on the road.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I just think he just keeps himself in the public eye, and he's happy about that.
Okay, Henning Kiensley wrote in to ask, will you do another feature on the Model 3 when Monroe has torn it to pieces? You bet we will. We'll get Sandy in here to spill his guts on everything that he can possibly tell us. Andy G wrote in, say, Ford changed many panels on the new U.S. Ranger, yet styling looks almost identical to the rest of the world Ranger. Its front metal bumper is the most noticeable difference. He's right. The North American Ranger was completely redesigned. It sure looks a lot like the other one.
We did a story about this that a lot of it had to do with the U.S. engineering team really wanting much tighter gaps in the exterior panels. So, I mean, we're talking millimeters, but to engineers, this is what matters, you know, to have tighter gaps, better fit and finish, and so forth. So, you know, okay, it's a pickup truck. How great can it look? I am really excited that the Ranger's coming back here in this form. And when I realized some years ago that they've been selling these things all around the world in much updated versions, you know, in versions that are much better than the old Ranger that we used to have here, it's about time that they finally brought
One
it
thing
here.
I'll add is, even though the front sheet metal looks very much the same as the international version, they had to do a lot of re-engineering for U.S. crash standards, especially for the small overlap test. And that doesn't show up in the Class A surfaces. Joe Lazio wrote in to ask, any comment on the PSA North American headquarter announcement and what that means for their growth plans? And of course, PSA announced that their headquarters are going to be in Atlanta.
I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, they announced it last week, and the very same week that Waymo announced that they're going to be begin testing on autonomous vehicles in Atlanta. So the question is, why Atlanta?
Mercedes is there, Porsche is there. It's a hot city.
Coca-Cola's there.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A is there. Home Depot is there.
Biggest airport in the world is there.
Is that right? Atlanta's the
I
biggest?
believe Atlanta, well, at least by the U.S.
biggest or the
standard.
busiest?
It's the largest.
Busiest.
Oh, maybe busiest.
Oh, Joe also went on to say the Toyota Mazda plan is a mistake unless they think NAFTA goes away and tariffs go up across the board. I kind of agree with him. I don't think Mazda needs more manufacturing capacity, especially not in North America.
No.
I'm not sure Toyota needs any more manufacturing capacity. I'm puzzled by them building a plant.
Yeah.
especially apropos of our earlier discussion that maybe car sales are going to start to drop.
They're making a new crossover in that plant. Isn't that what?
That Mazda is?
Or I thought that
or they both
one
are.
of the two was.
Well,
CX-3?
I don't know, but I thought it was a crossover, not a car plant.
okay, maybe this one's for you then, Gary. Kit Gerhardt writes, will cars have a resurgence after autonomous vehicles take over? I think
No,
he's talking about
I-
private cars. I think.
The basic architecture of a vehicle in the future will be probably more like a minivan. And
One box.
One box, and so the car, you know, a resurgence. But I mean, this would be like, you know, as Tom was saying, it's for stamp collectors or, you know, people who put coins in books.
Yeah. What was the question again?
Will cars have a
will cars-
resurgence after autonomous vehicles take over?
We don't know if he's talking about, like two-box or self-driving or cars without steering wheels, right? I mean, 'cause
I'm interpreting this to mean autonomous cars come out, they're boxes on wheels, and there's like a revulsion, a reaction. You know, people going, nah, I don't
people want to take control
I
back.
want to go back to driving.
Yeah, fat chance.
Okay. And final question. Ray Mitrowitz writes in, will fun factor play a big role someday? Once autonomous vehicles are there, maybe all the ones that are left to drive, i.e. by people, will only be the cars that are performance-driven vehicles.
Yeah.
They might not even be able to be driven. They won't have steering wheels. I mean,
No. They'll be performance vehicles, but it'll be like going to Cedar Point or some amusement park. Okay,
Right.
so you're going to these places and you're driving these things, right?
But-
And you're getting exhilaration and so on.
you have to rethink your vision of fun inside a vehicle because now you have fun by playing a board game in the car and doing.
You do that now, though.
I do not, but you know, I could possibly take a nap at some point in the future. Or, you know, I was out at CES. Did you see that Rinspeed Snap? And
No,
also
I didn't see it.
And also the Toyota e-Palette.
I saw the
Two
e-Palette.
identical concepts.
Well, they're boxes on wheels.
They
That's
are.
where it's going.
They are. And it's kind of fascinating to think of this skateboard that rolls underneath and the pod that then, you know, clips on. And you could have interchangeable pods where you
Yeah,
just,
here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
And they're doing pods. What Toyota's vision is you just reconfigure the interior.
Right.
And so they're talking about you don't do pizza delivery. You make the pizzas right in there and go deliver them.
You sell the shoes right in the, you know, you bring your shoes to a neighborhood where people, you know, or some festival or a place where people gather.
You have your
and
3D
people can
printer
go
in
right
there.
inside.
Your 3D
Your
printer in there.
fab
and
plants
yeah,
on wheels.
right there.
It is pretty amazing.
Done in one.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, with that, we're going to have to wrap this up. Tom Murphy, thanks so much for being on again.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long day, John.
Yeah. And it was great to have John Juriga here with the Kona. And Gary, great to do the show. Let's do it again next week.
Okay, let's do that.
And got to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.
And that's when you.
John's still here to talk to you.
Oh, John
Oh,
Juriga
yes?
is still here.
Oh,
That was the show when you say.
we almost should bring him back.
Through a chair.
I
You don't
got a
remember
question
any of that?
for John.
Maury Povich.
Yeah.
Think of a title for this show. No, I got to ask John about it. And we were so